Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another Pharaoh stream with myself, Pharaoh. And we are looking at Interwar Art at the Royal Academy 1925. Now, as ever, I have to be brief with these streams. I have less than 1 hour to take you through my top picks for 1925. So I'm just going to go straight into it. We've got, there's actually quite a few. This is a huge year, some really great stuff. So we're going to go 2 minutes at a pop. So let's start by looking at the first piece. This is a Harry Morley painting called The Outing. Morley we've seen in kind of two modes previously, either in his kind of classical mystical mode or in his realism. We've seen I guess like allegorical with the Vanity, but this is really on the realism side. Morley was really interested in gypsies and gypsy life. Interestingly, so is Laura Knight. There's a gypsy renaissance of art, and this is definitely one of Morley's better realist style paintings. I think Morley is best in his mythical vein, but this is an interesting piece. This is called An Outing, showing a gypsy family out by the lake, having fun. So, it's definitely kind of thinking about the kind of French impressionist here, but in his sculptural modernist style. And we've seen the kind of central group of kind of a father leaning up against a tree, mother on the ground trying to entertain two children as one sleeps. You can see the basket down at the bottom. They've had their lunch. There is definitely something kind of Renaissance about it. It's not just this kind of realist snapshot that he's kind of arranged things in terms of triangles, etc., in a very intentional way. So I like it. It's kind of like a bit of a hidden piece here from Morley. Okay, the next is I've got a 1-2 here, two Anning bells, but I thought I'd include this nice self-portrait in there that I thought was really quite lovely. Bell, who we've seen previously for doing some of the mosaic designs, we're going to see him do some more in a second, but this is him showing that he can really paint when he wants to as well. And this is the piece for his mosaics. Again, this is another Palace of Westminster piece. We've got Saint Stephen, Edward the Confessor, and King Stephen here. And I mentioned we saw some nice examples of what the mosaics look like up close, but not really the situation. And you can see the Stephen piece across here. So ironically, we can't really see the mosaic as well, but you get an idea of the St. Stephen's Hall. And I mentioned it kind of being a bit of an abundance of interest in design, but basically you've got statues of all of the previous prime ministers, these amazing panels. I think they are just painted, and then the stained glass as well as the mosaics. So again, I remember when I was there, I was just lost looking at the panels on the side, and I wish I paid more attention to Bell's wonderful mosaics. But at least you get a bit of a flavour of the space there. But it's more of the same anyway. So okay, on to someone new and a quite different piece here. This is from A.L. Swinnerton. And Swinnerton is one of our female Royal Academicians here, Annie Louisa Swinnerton. She studied in Manchester in the north, spent time with Watts and Burne-Jones, trying to create these kind of impressionistic pieces. I mean, you can definitely see some of the Watts in her with these kind of like smoky landscapes, kind of impressionistic, but also a bit kind of like very, very blended at the same time. Impressionism's like more kind of like sloppy strokes, while she's intentionally blending things together. But it creates this kind of very surreal, almost like dreamscape. It's called The Soul's Journey. So again, similar to what we saw with Philpott, Philpott's three giants going through into limbo. Here you've got this kind of skittish dancing figure disappearing into nothing. But I thought this is a good, nice little piece here from Hello again. Sorry about that. So the microphone fell out. But I see De Glen as this very like almost Shannon influenced here. We've got Cupid and Psyche here. So Cupid kind of descending from above. I mean, I quite like the Psyche here. I think she's like, I mean, it's a classic opportunity for a female nude, and it's a difficult position here. 3/4 with legs off the side, very, very tough. And I mean, I like the wings of the Cupid. He's not attempted to kind of have this kind of like Baroque realism. The wings are kind of almost displayed flatly. There's definitely something of the kind of Ricketts Moreau vein here as well. So nice starter piece here. Now, you may remember in our first outing, we had a Clausen relatively early at the start. We've got another one here. This one's called Summer Morning. And again, I just love you really just get a feel for things. It's all about kind of British countryside, these kind of shadows of horses. And also, I love the tree across here. It's really evocative of the light summer breezes blowing through the trees. Okay, another Orpen work, and again, this is really one of my favorites. I'm sorry, guys. The the microphone is conspiring against me today. This is the Lord Chief Justice of Ireland, and I would say in some ways this is one of his more impressionistic pieces. So I can just like look at the collar detail around the ermine across here. Very, very lightly done. It almost looks like it could be some kind of computer effect or something like that. But he's also got a lot of detail. So I just want you to notice the kind of lace around the collar there. That's so beautifully done. And he just picks out the light from each of the kind of curls of the periwig across there. Again, I really think that Orpen just brings the most out of his male sitters. It's a very confrontational portrait. He's looking straight at us. But his hands are kind of thoughtful. I mean, you immediately get this impression of again authority and strength, but I would say not in an overtly aggressive tone. So and I think that's fitting for a Chief Justice there. So lovely bit from Orphan here. So I think I mentioned Goscombe John previously. He's kind of like the Welsh new sculptor here. We've got Victory model of a bronze memorial panel. So again, even now in 25, there's still World War One bits coming up. I managed to find the original, and it looks in situ. It's quite a small piece here, but I actually love it. And again, I think just Goscombe is he's a really good sculptor. Again, in this kind of Renaissance-y style, Renaissance vein. And this is just a really, really nice piece here. Victory, she's wearing her helmet, but she's kind of reserved at the same time. And I think the placement's really cool. It's almost in like a semi-relief panel. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the, next to these tiny bits of stained glass. I'd need to see it in situ, but I think a brilliant little sculpture there from Goscombe. Speaking of sculpture, we've got the kind of academic favourite Thornycroft here, giving us the Bishop of Coventry. Now, obviously, you'll know instantly by the background if you've been to Cov that this is in the old cathedral, and it's interesting how this got kept inside here. Now, obviously, during the Second World War, it was bombed out, and they created the new one. But they've left the Thornycroft sculpture inside there. And actually, I think this is one of Thornycroft's better pieces here. And we've got the bishop kind of lying down in this kind of like classic medieval pose. So it's interesting. It's like Thornycroft is the most Renaissance-y of the kind of new sculpture gang, but he's having to do this kind of medieval style. I mean, a few notes. He's holding up Coventry Cathedral in his hands, which is quite cool, and he's also sitting on a rock. I mean, the true medievalist would have the would have something like an animal or something like that underneath. So he's trying to pare it back. Some nice little bits of kind of work showing kind of the kind of fabric of the cloth here as well. although interestingly, it's been sculpted as opposed to being etched. So just an interesting note. Again, I think this is one of Thornycroft's better ones. I couldn't find any other pictures, unfortunately, but nice little entry there this year. Okay, W.L. Wiley, he is that kind of maritime painter. I'm actually just going to skip this one because I've got a better one from Wiley here. So this is called The Nelson's Touch, Restoring HMS Victory, 1805 to 1925. So this is kind of like restoring one of Nelson's ships here at a dockyard. Again, it seems it's a nice maritime piece, but it really comes to life when you see the color version of it. And I thought, again, I think so much of maritime painting is like a pastiche, or it's naff, or it's kind of like this, yeah, Morgoth's biscuit tin traditionalism made manifest. But I think Wiley does manage to capture the kind of sense and the feel of the nautical, whilst with it being kind of genuine and authentic. And I think this is a really nice piece. Great colors in here from Wiley. A bit of a departure from his kind of like normal coastal scenes, etc. I like how you've also got the kind of sub in the background, so it's the kind of past and present. It's trying to create the kind of dialogue between the Imperial Navy from the past all the way to now. So very cool picture. Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Okay, next on to a Philpott again. A nice little picture here showing that he's still doing these portrait pieces, although definitely more in his kind of symbolist phase style. So again, if you remember his Two Sisters piece and the Rice Family, very realist. This is definitely adding in little elements of his more symbolist style pieces here, but still enough where I think it's kind of like still very sellable. So Philpott's still doing that, which is great, but he's also producing some really interesting pieces, and I really like this piece here from Philpott. This is the Angel of the Annunciation. Now you may notice that he often has, it's hard to tell whether it's intentional or not, but Philpott does paint a lot of African men, and I always think that you have a lot of these kind of fuzzy-haired, almost albino-esque figures. So maybe he's white, maybe again, I think there's a bit of ambiguity in terms of this kind of otherworldliness of the angel, and he likes the kind of he often kind of uses the albino in some of his theological works. But the Annunciation is, of course, Mary receiving the news that she's going to bear the Christ child. And I like this because it places us in the view of Mary. And so you've got, because at this time she's not at the stable, she's obviously living with their family. This is him. You can see their kind of houses in the nearby background showing that she's in a village. And we've got the shadow of Mary across here, so we're not even able to see her. But we've got this angel. He's almost kind of like as if he has descended down from on high and sort of landed at that point, throwing himself. There's something about if you know the Titian painting of Bacchus and Andromeda. Is it, correct me if I'm wrong, where he's leaping at the chariot. There's a little bit of that in this piece with the kind of cloak flying out, arms flying across here, and he's handing her a flower, arm out, saying, be not afraid, etc. And he's about to say the message. Obviously, the crocuses coming through as part of this kind of little scene. Crocus's first flower in spring. It kind of represents birth and life here. So I think a brilliant take on the Annunciation, very original, and again, definitely one of Philpott's better pieces. I mean, I still wouldn't put it as a top tier piece personally, but I like the fact he kind of keeps coming back to the theological. This is an Adrian Stokes, so this is kind of like the landscape painter / critic. I got to say, this painting looks a little bit better in black and white, and as soon as I got the colours out, I think it took away a little bit. So we'll move on pretty quickly. But of the Clausen vein, this kind of like all about shapes and symbols and shadows, as opposed to lots of detail on his pieces across here. Right, another Griffinhagen. He is from the kind of Pouvry, like quasi-symbolist, quite graphic style artist. We saw some of his other theological pieces, but this is no, this is the offerings. Maybe he saw the Spencer Watson offering painting and wanted to do something similar. And again, I wish we had the colors for this, because Griffin Hagen's colors really pop. We've got the three wise men. He's chosen to go for the kind of medieval style, Belshazzar as an African here. And we've got the three magi almost kind of popping around the corner. The kind of serene Mary. Again, I love the Mary in her face. Quite long Germanic face there. And then, of course, I mean, this has to be maybe one of the cutest baby Jesuses ever. And he's got a halo appearing above him. There is a kind of a subtleness and a gentleness to this piece. Does it borderline sentimental, I think, with the cute child, but I think it's in keeping with the rest of the piece. There's a reverential tenderness to it. So really nice. Wish we had the color version of it. Okay, on to a Sidney Lee, and again, this is Lee moving away from his kind of rocky landscape phase into more like, it's almost like realism as landscape. This is a realism painting. This is kind of this is the Roman wall. This is from his adventures in Italy. We saw a Venetian painting last time, I believe, of the St. Mark's Palazzo. And this is trying to capture people as they kind of walk about on their daily life. But he's not really interested in that. He is interested in the wall itself. And I love that about Lee. He's constantly reflecting on like the stone and the naturalness. And I think it's obvious. This is an obvious move from his kind of rocky landscapes, where he's kind of showing off the kind of harshness and strength of nature, to this piece, which is kind of like man harnessing it. But look at the kind of rough hues on there. I mean, he's spent so much time and effort adding in detail to each of these heavy blocks, and it gives you that kind of very, very kind of vivid feeling of the wall itself. But also, like I said, it's a reflection on material at the same time. Okay, let's keep on moving. We've got a Russell Flint. Now, Russell we haven't had beforehand, so let me just quickly read about him. He's Scottish, known for his watercolors. I mean, I would say that he does a lot of these kind of like women pieces. Flint, there is too many like prints. You know, some artists get overly done in terms of their prints. Salvador Dali is a good example. Russell Flint is another example of this. He does a lot of kind of like, I would say, Anatolian realist paintings, which I don't really like at all. But he also does a lot of these kind of allegorical pieces as well. So really nice piece here from Flint on like, it's called a Spring Caprice. You know, I think this is just an example. It's just an excuse for him to do a couple of nudes here, but it's done really, really nicely. It's not kind of like salacious. There's a daintiness to it and a freshness to it. And I think Flint's definitely someone to watch out for. He does stuff like this in this mode quite often. Okay, we've got another portrait here. This is from John A.M. Hay. We had him last time. He does these kind of like brooding realisms. I think he did the Jeunesse last time. And this is Miss Irene Delaney. I'm pretty sure she's like an actress or a film star. And I mean, we've got to immediately talk about the lighting for this. Very dramatic, lit from the bottom. You can see the car shadow in the background here, but it's also very bright. Her face kind of like almost being melded out. It's again all about chiaroscuro, but not in the old masters way. I think it's more about, there's a kind of a realism in the sense of reality here, sense of the piece. Stuff flowing together. I mean, Hay is very interesting and very unique. And again, this definitely caught my eye. Would have loved to see this in color, but wasn't able to. Okay, let's skip the Brock one. That was okay. Right, here's I think a really important piece from this year. Henry A. Pegram. Pegram, the apprentice of Thornycroft. I think he's been under Thornycroft's spell for a long time. And this is really him stepping out to create something, I think, brilliant. This is his best work. It's called Into the Silent Land. And obviously, this is a kind of a memorial. You've got this kind of woman here who is beautiful, but you can see the distress in her face, and she's being held up by a death-like figure. I mentioned kind of like the Pegram, Thornycroft. They love these kind of like chunky robed women in the background. So again, by themselves, I think they look a bit boxy, but as this kind of enveloping G.F. Wattsian figure with the kind of live nude in the front, it's a brilliant piece. Now, it looks even better live and in the flesh, and I genuinely think this is Pegram's greatest work across here, because look at the shadows. He's got a lot of depth under the hood across here for the figure, and that kind of creates it doesn't put the face into too much shadow, but it creates this very dramatic effect of darkness and peace and shade. So I think this is a very powerful piece, very reflective. I mean, the girl is quite young herself, so I think that there is that kind of mournfulness as well. She's literally wearing flowers in her hair, and you're asking the question, who is she? But also, there's kind of like maybe there's something of the allegorical a day passing into night there. Yeah, lovely piece from Pegram. Right, we've got a Dixie piece, but interestingly, Dixie back in more of his kind of arts and crafts phase here. This is a Romeo and Juliet, and I've managed to find it's not the same piece, but it's a larger piece that he did, just so you can get an idea of the colors. I mean, I personally feel that at this stage that Dixie's portraits are way better than like him at his arts and crafts peak is brilliant. For example, like his Arthur pieces are second to none. But I feel like this is a good piece, but I think we get more out of his portraits at this point. But I love Aroundel. I think it's a really novel format. We should be doing more things in circles. It's a very decorative piece to put stuff in Aroundel. So it's great for specific rooms and spaces. Okay, I mentioned last time Lavery starting to get into his stride a bit, and I think this is again one of his better pieces. George Bernard Shaw here. I mean, Shaw's probably the most portraited person in the whole period. If I'm honest with you, I think he gets 3 or 4 from various people, and I do quite like this one from Lavery. Lavery loves to do this kind of 3/4 sitting down. You got this kind of casual feel, but there's the directness in the face. And again, you really get a lot of the character out of Shaw here. Okay, on to this like post-impressionist nude. Really, this is from A. Palmer. Let me just read about him. Painter in oil and watercolor. Studied at the Royal Academy. Spent some time with Sargent as well. Loves the old masters. I mean, there are a lot of these like male nudes as well. So again, I do feel like this is the great age of the nude. I feel like a lot of the male ones are a bit samey, and that's why I haven't included some of them. Like Philpott does a lot better with the male body, I think. But this was really good because again, it's less confrontational in the fact that a lot of the male nudes are kind of like will be quite like show all, but it's a transitory piece. It's people in the middle of changing or just coming back from the sea and they're drying themselves. So it's kind of like you're capturing a moment, but it's not like about the nudity in itself. I mean, Palmer's done a lovely job with the kind of the colors here, strong contrast, but again that kind of impressionistic feel. I say kind of post-impressionistic because there are these little elements like the rocks kind of just turning into single paintbrushes, etc., or the kind of very flat background could be straight out of like a Monet or something like that. Okay, this one's like an interesting piece here, and this is from Ricketts. We've seen him do his thing as like the kind of Moreau painter, championing Puvis and the Symbolist previously, but he also does a lot of theatre-based pieces, and this is a costume for a piece called Sakuntala, and long of the story short, it's an Indian tale which was then turned into a performance in 1920. Now, interestingly, Ricketts didn't do the costumes for this production. And so it's thought that, because it happened roughly during just after the war, it's thought that he saw it and then was inspired by the performance and then wanted to try and get it put on. And this is almost like a pitch document. The drawing itself is of a costume of the prince in a proposed production of Lawrence Binion's Sakuntala. So there we go. Really interesting piece here. Again, Ricketts is like theatre stuff. It very much reminds me of like something like Leon Basque. If you're familiar with him, very free, very interesting. I love his theatre stuff. Definitely check into it if you haven't seen it. Speaking of Ricketts, we've got 2 more pieces here. We've got a Pontius Pilate, which again I think's okay. Nothing too mind-blowing about it, actually, thinking about it. But this next piece here, which is his Salome, is really powerful. I absolutely love it here. So we've got, I'm pretty sure this is kind of like after the request has happened. So we've got Salome here. She's just done. She's disrobed, so she's clearly done her dance. We've got Herod at the top here. I love Herod as Aztec. So again, you can see the kind of like Oriental inspiration that's going on to Ricketts at the same time. He's interested with the Aztecs in some of his works as well. The piece in itself is kind of set quite close up, so you can't really see what's going on, but you immediately get the feel that you're in court. You've got these gigantic columns showing that it's the imperial palace, etc. And then you've got the kind of grimy looking onlookers on the left hand side, and they're wondering what's happening. I mean, Salome here is very, very like powerful. She's kind of looking away. This is one of my favorite Salomes of all time, I gotta say. There is obviously the kind of raw sexuality to her. She's almost down. She's almost nude to the pubis, which is practically like explicit. With the nude, it's about fully like being fully undressed, but it's this kind of partial all the way down. Is practically scandalous, I think. I wonder how people reacted to it. But there is a harshness and a coldness and an aloofness, even though she's covered in these beautiful fabrics. You can see Ricketts here showing the kind of see-through silks that makes part of her outfit and her dress. And again, a great kind of Rossetti-esque long, tall face, but and she's got kind of like the golden arm bands, the jewels on her hands. But interestingly, I think her hair being bound up, it's about like power and wealth and opulence, but also control at the same time. And so now what's happening in the background? Sort of Herod's looking on into the distance here. We've got the figure folded up next to her. I mean, at first I was thinking, is this the wife of Herod? And she's kind of regretting her decision. It could be, or it could just be another courtier who's very upset about what's about to happen to John. And then at the background, this kind of another kind of goblin-esque. I mean, he loves these kind of freaky figures, Ricketts. Again, there is definitely something like romantic in the painting way, like a Fuseli, something like that. He's definitely tapping into some of that dark energy from the early Royal Academy as well, which I love. Some of these figures just kind of fade into the background. The setting's also kind of like, yes, it's Oriental, but it's also kind of Romanesque as well, which is kind of fitting. So I think he is trying to give that kind of Romans in the Middle East vibe. So I love it. Probably my favorite Salome ever off the back of this piece. Definitely one of the better ones. Okay. We've got an Avril Burley here. We had her last time. She does some of these kind of like period pieces. This is called The Keeper of the Keys. Now, I couldn't find a color version of it. However, I managed to find a self-portrait that I thought was very, very similar. See if you can see like the hat. I'm pretty sure it's a self-portrait in the other piece here. But you get an idea of the colours again. This is very much, I would say, in the kind of Griffenhagen, like Pouvry-esque colour landscape, but also a bit of a kind of a LARPy reflection on a kind of Renaissance at the same time. A nice piece, interesting. I don't think too much depth, but I think this is kind of like a bit of a dressed up self-portrait, if I'm honest with you, from Avril here. Okay, let's move on to Fred Appleyard's Orpheus and Eurydice here, and this is kind of interesting. Appleyard, this is a bit of a one-hit wonder here from him. He did win a gold medal prize after studying at the Royal Academy. He was related. He spent a lot of time in the colonies, specifically in South Africa, and there's a few pieces knocking around the place from him. I would say not that kind of well known, not that but I sort of like this little snapshot here, this kind of very lightly painted piece, and you've got kind of Eurydice behind Orpheus as he turns around, Orpheus with his lyre across here. There is definitely something kind of like Caravaggio-esque about this. There's the kind of the darkness of the background, the light like hitting Eurydice, and he's just about to reach the entranceway here, coming out of hell, and he looks behind and causes her to return to hell again. So again, I think it's just a really interesting piece. You can't really see the faces at all, which again I thought was interesting. It's all about what you can't see. Difficult poses here, really nicely done. And I thought the Eurydice in particular, she's almost kind of collapsed, her breasts exposed, but also bathing in the light was very evocative, very powerful here from Appleyard. Really nice individual piece here. Okay, something interesting here from the sculpture side of things. This is from Antonio Sciorratino. Now, interestingly, he's Maltese. I was speaking to Fez on Twitter, and there is a museum of his work, actually. I've been to Malta and didn't notice it, unfortunately. And he does some really good stuff, really. I would say it starts off kind of like kind of Renaissance Academy, but definitely goes more into the quote deco modernist style. Spent a lot of time in Rome, specifically working with the Royal Academy, the British Academy of Arts in Rome, and sort of heading that up. Because of his time in Italy, it's obvious that he's going to get influenced by the Italians, and so we've got this piece, The Rhythms of Life, which is this wonderful, really beautiful piece. I think he's a really underrated artist of the time. You've got two dancers, one fully dressed, kind of standing tall with a robe, and one kind of hunched over, bare-breasted at the same time. I think there's definitely something about it's about youth versus age. It's about like the old way and the new way. This girl here could be a flapper from a jazz club, while the figure in the back looks more like she's kind of waltzing in an Elizabethan vein. I really, I really love the treatment of the fabrics here. It's really lightly touched, nothing too heavy, but also there's so much expression. Like, look at that skirt and the kind of almost kind of relief-like details that he's brought in there. There's lots of verticals, lots of horizontals at the same time, but still very dynamic. So really interesting piece here. I really liked it, and especially the heads here, really cool. Thank you. Okay, on to Speed. We've had a couple of his pieces already. This is called Bather at the Falls. This is very much in Speed's wheelhouse. The master renderer. I mean, this is good. I feel like Speed just gets stuck a little bit too much into reality. I wish I had the color version of this, because I think he does do colors really nicely. He does. This is kind of like a similar setting to his last piece, if you remember, which had a female nude by like a rocky canyon at the same time. Love the format here, long and thin, just like a Burne-Jones painting or something like that. So and it's essentially like a nude, really. You've got a contrapposto with the leg, but then a three-quarter twist and that kind of confrontation across here. Like you've just caught her as she's gone into undress, but she's stretching. So there's kind of something voyeuristic about it, but then there's also something about the water and the fountain and the kind of the life-bringing water that comes as part of it. So nice piece. I think definitely one of Speed's better pieces, but like I said, I think he still suffers from too much realism, a bit too much attention to detail, and not as much kind of looseness. Okay, this is a really interesting piece here from Gilbert Bayes. This is called Spirit of the Streams. So Bayes is definitely one of the most quote-unquote deco style sculptors that we have. And you can see he's definitely being influenced by these kind of Assyrian and Egyptian forms in the background. And we've got this kind of rather like chubby-cheeked spirit herself. Now, I would say this piece is kind of like, at first I was like, oh, okay, it's kind of nice. I quite like the background here. I'm not so keen on the main figure, if I'm honest with you. But I managed to find the actual piece. That was that it was actually turned into, and interestingly, it was eventually cast into a lead, and more importantly, he changed the face of the woman, which I think has made a huge difference. But I love this as a kind of a heavy lead ornamented structure across here. It works really well because you've got the kind of the like a lead patina is like so severe basically. But you've got all of the kind of green moss coming off it. But so she really looks like she's sort of emerging out of the river. She does look like she's in a wood nymph. I would say that like I'm less keen on his like sculpture here, but the actual finished cast piece is really brilliant. I've got also we've got some pictures of it in the round as well, and you can see that the rams almost make up part of like a seat here, and you can see this is very kind of Assyrian early primitive-esque. Love the rendering on the rams here, really cool. I've got a close-up picture of the girl. He tried out several things. You can see in this version here, there's a backing to the rams to create part of the seat. He's taken it out in this piece, and he's taken it out in this piece, and I think that was the right thing to do. I think I quite like. I really love this chair. I think it's really cool. He's also trying stuff out, like putting like a tiara on her. Again, I don't think that works. I think the figure here is actually just way better than the original. Makes her a little more kind of quizzical, and has kind of chiseled her features a little bit more, I think. Okay, speaking of sculpture, this has been a banging year for sculpture, I think. We've got this piece from S. Nicholas Babb. Now, let me just dig out my notes on Babb here. Oh, I didn't. Okay, I haven't got too much about him. I would say that he's kind of like, again, a figure that starts off very kind of academic, but is very inspired by guys like Karl Miles and kind of European modernist sculptures to create more deco style pieces. Again, I don't know if you'd definitely call this like a full-on quote unquote deco piece, but you can see here that there's a lot of stylization going on with the bull. And of course, sorry, the piece is called Jupiter and the Princess of Phoenicia, otherwise known as Europa and the Bull. This is where Jupiter, in the guise of a bull, steals her away. And often you've got kind of Europa kind of being a bit blindsided, but I like this kind of Europa riding side saddle almost, willing him on. There's a kind of a yearningness. I mean, look at the eyes of this Jupiter here. He's such like a proud like a proud figure. I think this is one of my favorite depictions of of this kind of classic scene. The sculpture work, you've got the kind of blockiness to the muscle groupings, giving it that kind of more Assyrian feel to it. But there's so much depth and feeling in it. I absolutely love it. Now, I managed to find this piece as well, and interestingly, it's been cast into like a ceramic, I think, or maybe there was a glaze or some kind of protection on the piece. And this was sold in America for, I think it was like $5,000. Can you believe? Which I think is an utter bargain for this masterpiece. Really, I think this is great. I wish this was in England, or I definitely see it. But apparently, it's in America. Really love it. Love the headdress for the Phoenician here as well. Really beautiful. It's delicateness, but it's also strength. This is the most kind of like sexual, like I wouldn't say energy necessarily, but like sectional resonance between the two of any kind of grouping. Normally, it's like I said, it's like the princess not knowing what's going on, also just sort of just generally sitting. There's a definite kind of feeling of desire between the two, and I think Jupiter's very proud of himself and knows it. But again, yeah, nice to see it in the flesh, and the fact that it is still knocking around as well. Okay. We're going to round out this session with a piece on from F. Derwent Wood. Again, he's kind of like in the periphery of the new sculpture guys, but this is another memorial piece from the Machine Gun Corps Memorial, and I believe that's sort of near Marble Arch or near Hyde Park. So kind of like, I'm not sure if it's at the end or at the top, basically, but this is a version of David here, and you've got David with Goliath's sword, and I think this is a real just like masterpiece of like Renaissance revivalism. Like maybe missing some of the character, I think, of someone like obviously Michelangelo, etc. I mean, when you're doing a David, it's a tough gig. What I like about it is I really hate Fay David's, like Donatello's David, very much dislike. This is kind of like David as man, but also there's you've got the kind of full-on Renaissance swagger, but the sword is brilliant as well. This is the piece in reality. Again, sorry, this isn't a great shot. I think the angle's not great. The piece in situ looks really brilliant. I'd definitely recommend any Londoners go check it out. But I think they do a better shot in the actual magazine itself. But again, a really nice piece. Like I said, perfect example of this Renaissance revival. I think the only thing I would say that's negative is, like, how is this better than the Renaissance? I feel like obviously with Michelangelo's David is actually quite stylized, really. Not even in terms of the fact that he's changing proportions, whatever, for the space, blah 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 blah. But you can see in the way that he's dealing with the muscle groupings, etc. It's kind of stylized. This is very very realist. This is this could be a black and white photo of a man. If I hadn't have told you that it was maybe the face gives it away a little bit, almost too real. And I think do we want too much realism in our statues? I don't think so. I think you lose something, and even at the kind of highest point, there is this kind of stylization in the works of Renaissance workers, but artists. But again, I think a really good piece and a really suitable memorial for the soldiers as well. So that is, I've managed to absolutely rattle through today. I don't know, we've gone very very quickly. So let me just summarize what we saw today. I mean, lots of interesting new pieces. I feel like stuff is definitely, again, moving more in that kind of modernist vein. What are my highlights from this year? I would say definitely like the Philpott was kind of cool. I like that. What was my favorites? The Pegram Into the Silent Lands, great. It's a very good sculpture year. The Rhythms of Life was good. The Bays one's good. The Bab one's really good. And I think the Charles Ricketts Salome was probably another top 10. And maybe the Orpen again, the Chief Justice, I think was very very powerful. But yeah, we had quite a few pieces from this year, 33. So again, it shows that there's a real quality coming through, and lots of artists working hard. There's lots of commissions out there as well. I think that's what you've got to remember. There's rebuilding happening. There's money flowing into things again. The British Empire peaked fiscally at 32. I was seeing AA was saying, which I thought was kind of interesting, and you can see that there was definitely like wealth and like money around from patrons and lots of great art being done. So again, there is a definite feel of the new dawn and this new age coming through. So I think really good year. One of my favorites, actually, 25, although heavily sculptural. But keep watching. We're going to see what happens next year. So I will see you next year.